The scent of pine and wet earth filled my lungs as I stood at the edge of the forest, my thin cotton dress offering little protection against the autumn chill. The moon hung low and swollen above the treetops, bathing the clearing in silver light that cast long shadows across the ceremonial grounds. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the pack members gather in their finery, fur-lined cloaks, polished leather, silver ornaments that caught the moonlight and winked like stars. I remained in the shadows, clutching the small wooden pendant my grandmother had pressed into my palm before they took her away. "Remember, Clara," she had whispered, her fingers trembling against mine. "Our weakness is our greatest strength. When they cannot see you, that is when you can truly see them." I ran my thumb over the pendant's worn surface, tracing the carved symbol of the crescent moon. The pack's annual selection ceremony was a sacred tradition, one that determined the fate of unmarked omegas like myself. Those chosen would serve the pack's elite, the hunters, the council members, and in rare cases, the royal family itself. Those rejected would be banished to the borderlands, left to fend for themselves among rogues and outcasts. As the lowest-ranking omega in the Silver Claw Pack, I had spent my 22 years of life being overlooked, dismissed, or worse, forgotten entirely. My pale blonde hair, almost white in the moonlight, fell in tangled waves down my back. Unlike the sleek, groomed appearances of the other omegas lined up for selection, I hadn't bothered with elaborate braids or scented oils. What was the point? No one ever looked at me long enough to notice. The ceremonial drums began, a deep, primal rhythm that vibrated through the ground and into my bones. I took my place at the end of the line, eyes downcast as tradition demanded. Around my neck, the wooden pendant felt warm against my skin, my grandmother's final gift before illness claimed her 3 moons ago. She had been the only one who saw me, truly saw me, beyond my omega status. "Stand straight," hissed Lydia, the omega beside me, her dark hair elaborately styled with silver threads woven through the braids. "The council is watching." I straightened my spine but kept my gaze lowered. The drums intensified as the council members entered the clearing, their faces stern in the firelight. Behind them, shadowy figures moved with predatory grace, the alpha elites, here to make their selections. A hush fell over the gathering as the final figure emerged from the tree line. Even without looking up, I could feel his presence, a wall of power that pressed against my senses, making it difficult to breathe. The Alpha King. Rumors of his cruelty and strength had spread through the lower ranks like wildfire since his ascension to the throne 1 year ago. After the mysterious death of his father, "Let the selection begin," announced Elder Mira, her voice carrying across the clearing. One by one, the Omegas were approached, scented, and either chosen or passed over. Some wept with relief when selected, others with despair when rejected. The crowd thinned until only 3 of us remained: Lydia, a red-haired boy whose name I didn't know, and myself. The red-haired boy was chosen by a member of the hunting party. Lydia trembled as a council member approached her, scented her neck, and nodded in approval. She was led away, casting a final glance of pity in my direction. And then, I was alone. The clearing had grown quiet. I could feel eyes on me, curious about the forgotten Omega left unchosen. I kept my head bowed, my fingers clutching my grandmother's pendant so tightly that the edges bit into my palm. "What about this one?" Elder Mira asked, her voice tinged with impatience. "Does anyone claim the last Omega?" Silence answered her. I had expected this, had prepared myself for the walk of shame to the borderlands that would follow. Yet the familiar ache of rejection still burned beneath my ribs. "No one?" Elder Mira pressed. "Then she will be... I will take her." The voice cut through the clearing like a blade of ice, deep, commanding, and utterly devoid of emotion. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by whispers that rushed like wind through leaves. I lifted my gaze, breaking tradition, unable to contain my shock. Standing before me, towering at least a foot taller, was the Alpha King himself. His face was a study in harsh angles and cold beauty, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a winter storm. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, revealing a thin scar that ran from his temple to his jawline. "Your Majesty," Elder Mira stammered, "there are more suitable Omegas from the Northern Territories arriving tomorrow. This one is—" She gestured vaguely at me, searching for a diplomatic way to highlight my inadequacies. "Unremarkable," she finally settled on, the word piercing me like a physical blow. The Alpha King's gaze never left my face, his expression unreadable. "I have made my selection." His scent reached me then, pine and smoke and something metallic like blood. My instincts screamed at me to bare my neck in submission, but something in his cold assessment kept me frozen in place. "What is your name, Omega?" he demanded. I swallowed hard. "Clara, Your Majesty. Clara." He spoke my name as if testing its weight on his tongue. "You will accompany me to the palace." It wasn't a request. As he turned away, expecting me to follow, whispers erupted around us. I caught fragments. "Why her?" "And plain little thing, and won't last a week," before Elder Mira silenced them with a sharp gesture. I followed the Alpha King across the clearing, my legs moving mechanically. The palace loomed ahead, a sprawling structure of stone and glass built into the mountainside. I had only seen it from a distance before, its windows glowing like eyes in the darkness. Inside, servants scurried out of our path, keeping their eyes downcast. The Alpha King moved with predatory grace through corridors decorated with tapestries depicting hunt scenes and ancient battles. I struggled to keep pace, my worn boots slipping on the polished stone floors. Finally, he stopped before an ornate door and turned to face me. In the warm light of the corridor, I could see his features more clearly. He wasn't just intimidating. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, like the edge of a blade or the eye of a storm. "Do you know why I chose you, Omega?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I shook my head, clutching my pendant like a lifeline, "Because you were the only one who looked at me without fear or ambition in your eyes." His lips curved in what might have been a smile on anyone else, but on him, it looked like a threat. Just emptiness. I found that intriguing. Before I could respond, he pushed open the door, revealing a spacious chamber with a large bed, a fireplace, and windows that overlooked the forest. My heart stuttered in my chest as I realized what this room might be for, what he might expect of me. "This is where you'll stay," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "Alone." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by confusion. "I don't understand, Your Majesty. If you don't want me for that, then why bring me here?" His expression darkened. "I didn't say I didn't want you, Omega. I said you'll stay here, alone. For now." He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "You see, I have a proposition for you." The way he said proposition sent a chill down my spine. "What kind of proposition?" I asked, hating how my voice trembled. "A simple one." He circled me slowly, his gaze assessing every detail of my appearance. "Survive the night, Omega, and I'll spare you." Spare me from what? The question escaped before I could stop it. He smiled then, revealing canines slightly longer and sharper than they should be, even for an alpha, from becoming like the others, empty vessels serving a purpose until they're no longer useful. He stopped in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Survive until dawn, and perhaps you'll prove more valuable alive than dead." My blood turned to ice. "You're going to try to kill me?" "No." He stepped back, his expression unreadable once more. "But what roams the palace at night might. The doors will be locked. The windows are too high to jump. You have until sunrise." With that, he turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Clara," he said, pausing in the doorway. "Don't disappoint me. I've developed a particular distaste for disappointment." The door closed behind him with a sound of finality, followed by the click of a lock engaging. I stood frozen in the center of the room, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. "When they cannot see you, that is when you can truly see them." I had survived being invisible my entire life. Perhaps tonight, that skill would keep me alive. Outside, the moon rose higher, casting silver light through the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a howl rose, long, mournful, and hungry. The night had only just begun. The howling faded, leaving behind a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I surveyed the room, my prison for the night, taking in details I had missed in my initial shock. The bed was large enough for 3 people, covered in furs and silken sheets in shades of deep blue and silver. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes hung on either side of a large wardrobe, and a writing desk sat beneath one of the tall windows. Luxury surrounded me, but I wasn't fooled. This was still a cage, no matter how gilded. Survive the night, I whispered to myself, clutching my grandmother's pendant. What had the Alpha King meant? Was this some kind of twisted game? And what roamed the palace at night that could pose such a threat? I moved to the door first, testing the handle. Locked, as he'd said. The windows were next, 3 tall arches that looked out over the forest and the mountains beyond. The glass was cool beneath my fingertips, and when I pressed my forehead against it, I could see the drop below. At least 4 stories, with nothing but jagged rocks at the bottom. The Alpha King hadn't lied about that either. A soft scraping sound from somewhere outside the door made me freeze. I held my breath, listening. It came again, the whisper of something dragging across stone, followed by what sounded like claws clicking against the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs as the sounds grew closer, stopping just outside my door. Silence fell once more, heavy and expectant. Then came a sniffing sound, as if whatever waited beyond was scenting the air. Scenting me. The handle rattled, and a low growl vibrated through the wood. I backed away, frantically searching for a weapon, a hiding place, anything. The wardrobe caught my eye, large enough to conceal me if necessary. But hiding seemed futile. If something with a predator's sense of smell was hunting me, it would find me regardless of where I tried to hide. The scratching at the door intensified, becoming more frenzied. Splinters of wood fell to the floor as whatever was out there began to tear through the barrier between us. I needed a plan, and quickly. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. Watch. Listen. Think. I forced myself to slow my breathing, to observe my surroundings with clear eyes rather than panic-blurred vision. The room was designed for comfort, not defense. But perhaps... My gaze fell on the fireplace, where flames licked hungrily at a stack of logs. Fire. Most predators feared fire. I grabbed a poker from the hearth set and thrust it into the flames, watching as the metal tip began to glow red-hot. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Once. Twice. The wood cracked, a long fissure appearing down the middle. I positioned myself beside the door, the hot poker raised and ready. If I couldn't run, I would fight. My hands trembled, but I gripped the weapon tighter, forcing strength into my arms. The door splintered inward with a crash, and I caught my first glimpse of my hunter, a massive wolf, its fur black as midnight, eyes glowing amber in the firelight. But this was no ordinary wolf. It stood almost as tall as me on all fours, its shoulders bunched with muscle beneath sleek fur, its muzzle wrinkled to reveal fangs as long as my fingers. It paused in the doorway, those intelligent eyes scanning the room before landing on me. A growl rumbled from its chest, vibrating through the air between us. I raised the poker higher, its glowing tip pointed at the beast. "Stay back," I warned, my voice steadier than I expected. To my surprise, the wolf hesitated, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of hot metal. It paced at the threshold, its massive paws leaving claw marks in the wooden floor. I took advantage of its momentary caution to edge toward the center of the room, putting more space between us. The wolf followed, its movements deliberate, calculated. This was no mindless beast. There was intelligence in those amber eyes, a predatory cunning that assessed and planned. It circled to my left, and I pivoted to keep the poker between us. "What do you want?" I asked, not expecting an answer, but needing to fill the terrible silence with something other than my fear. The wolf's ears flicked forward at the sound of my voice. It lowered its head slightly, muscles tensing in a way that made my instincts scream danger. When it lunged, it moved faster than I could track. One moment it was across the room, the next it was airborne, jaws open and aimed for my throat. I swung the poker with all my strength, catching the beast across the snout. The impact jarred my arms to the shoulders, but the wolf yelped and veered off course, crashing into the writing desk instead of me. Wood splintered as the desk collapsed beneath the wolf's weight. It shook its head, dazed but far from defeated. Blood matted the fur around its muzzle where the poker had struck. But the wound seemed to only enrage it further. I backed toward the bed, keeping the poker extended. The wolf circled again, more cautiously this time, respect or at least wariness in its gaze. "I don't want to hurt you," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "But I will if I have to," the wolf snarled, teeth gleaming in the firelight. It feinted left, then right, testing my reflexes. I kept my gaze locked on its eyes, remembering my grandmother's lessons about predators. Never look away first, never show fear, never run. As we circled each other in this deadly dance, I noticed something strange. The wolf's movements seemed almost deliberate, controlled, as if it were testing me rather than simply hunting me. A horrible suspicion began to form in my mind. "Is this part of his game?" I asked aloud. "Did he send you to test me, or are you him?" The wolf's ears pricked forward at my words, and something like surprise flashed in those amber eyes. Taking advantage of the beast's momentary distraction, I lunged for the bed, scrambling across it to put the massive piece of furniture between us. The wolf followed, leaping onto the mattress with ease. The sheets tore beneath its claws as it advanced, its hot breath washing over my face. In desperation, I thrust the poker forward, aiming for the soft underside of the wolf's jaw. But the beast was quicker, dodging the blow and clamping its jaws around the metal shaft. With a powerful twist of its head, it wrenched the weapon from my grasp, sending it clattering across the floor. Defenseless, I backed against the wall, my fingers finding my grandmother's pendant. The wolf approached slowly now, savoring the moment, its prey cornered and unarmed. "If you're going to kill me," I said, meeting those amber eyes, "then do it. But know that I fought. Remember that I wasn't easy prey." The wolf paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering my words. Then, to my astonishment, it backed away, jumping down from the bed to stand by the shattered door. It watched me for a long moment, those intelligent eyes assessing something I couldn't fathom. Then it turned and loped from the room, the sound of its claws clicking against stone fading into silence. I remained frozen against the wall, waiting for the beast to return, to finish what it had started. Minutes passed, and the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and my own ragged breathing. Eventually, I slid down the wall to sit on the floor, my legs too weak to hold me. Had I passed some kind of test? Or was this merely a reprieve before the next phase of the Alpha King's cruel game? The night stretched before me, long and uncertain. I retrieved the poker from where it had fallen, the metal now cool to the touch, and clutched it like a talisman. Sleep was out of the question, not with a shattered door and a palace that apparently housed monsters. As the adrenaline of the encounter began to fade, I found myself studying the room more carefully, searching for clues, for meaning in this bizarre situation. Why had the Alpha King chosen me? What purpose did this test serve? My gaze fell on the remains of the writing desk. Amid the splintered wood lay scattered papers, books, and writing implements. Curious, I crawled forward to examine them. Most of the papers contained mundane correspondence, reports from village elders, requests for audience with the king, lists of supplies. But one leather-bound journal caught my eye. It had fallen open to reveal pages filled with handwriting that was bold and sharp, the letters slanting aggressively across the paper. I hesitated only briefly before picking it up. If I was to survive this night, perhaps understanding my captor was key. The journal entries were dated, the most recent from just 3 days ago. I began to read, my heart pounding with the transgression of peering into the Alpha King's private thoughts. The council grows more insistent about the mating ceremony. They fail to understand that I have no interest in a political alliance, nor in some simpering Omega who seeks only power and status. The bloodline must continue, they say. The throne must be secured, as if I haven't already sacrificed everything for this crown. The dreams have returned, blood on snow, her face contorted in betrayal, the sensation of claws tearing through flesh, my own or another's, I can never tell. The voice that whispers, "A king without compassion is merely a tyrant with a crown." Perhaps they are right to fear me. Perhaps I am becoming what I swore to destroy. I flipped forward several pages, my fingers trembling. Another assassination attempt tonight, poison in the wine. The culprit wore my father's ring, a final insult before I tore out his throat. He claimed to act for the good of the pack, to prevent the bloodline from being tainted by madness. Am I mad? The beast grows stronger each night, harder to control. The shift comes unbidden now, drawn out by rage or even mere frustration. The council watches me with wary eyes. They believe I don't notice their whispers, their contingency plans, should I prove as unstable as they fear. Tomorrow is the selection. They've gathered omegas from across the territory, each one briefed and coached on how to please me, how to tame me. Little do they know that I seek not a mate, but a mirror, someone who might reflect back to me what remains of my humanity, if anything does. I closed the journal, my mind reeling. The Alpha King was losing control of his wolf, becoming more beast than man, and the council feared him, perhaps with good reason. Was that why he had chosen me? Because I was unremarkable, forgettable, a nobody whose disappearance would go unnoticed if his beast took control. A chill ran down my spine as another possibility occurred to me. What if I hadn't fought off a random wolf, but the Alpha King himself in his shifted form? Had he been testing me, seeing if I would cower or fight? I tucked the journal into the pocket of my dress. Knowledge was power, my grandmother had always said, and in this deadly game, I needed every advantage. Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, casting the room into deeper shadow. I had survived the first attack, but instinct told me the night was far from over. I gathered what remained of my courage and began to formulate a plan. If another predator came, I would be ready. And if the Alpha King returned, either as man or beast, I had questions that demanded answers. The pendant felt warm against my skin, a reminder of my grandmother's strength, her wisdom. Our weakness is our greatest strength, she had said. Perhaps being overlooked, underestimated, had prepared me for this moment more than I knew. I stood, poker in hand, and faced the shattered doorway. Whatever came next, I would meet it on my feet. The palace grew quieter as the night deepened. I had dragged a heavy chair to barricade what remained of the door, though I harbored no illusions about its effectiveness against the wolf should it return. The fire had burned low, casting the room in amber shadows that shifted and danced across the walls. Outside, the moon hung high in the sky, perhaps 3 or 4 hours until dawn. I paced the length of the room, the Alpha King's journal clutched in one hand, the poker in the other. The wolf hadn't returned, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Several times, I thought I heard footsteps in the corridor beyond the shattered door, but when I listened more carefully, there was only silence. My mind kept returning to the journal entries, to the torment evident in those bold, slashing words. The Alpha King was feared, even hated, yet his private thoughts revealed something closer to desperation than tyranny. The council suspected him of madness, or was it merely their fear of his uncontrollable power? A soft knock at the remains of my door froze me mid-stride. "Hello?" a female voice called. "May I come in?" I raised the poker, positioning myself behind the chair barricade. "Who are you?" "My name is Elise. I serve as the royal physician." There was a pause. "The Alpha King sent me to tend to you." I hesitated. This could be another test, another threat in a different form. "Why would he do that?" "He said you might have been injured." Another pause. He seemed concerned. Concerned? The word seemed incongruous with everything I knew about the Alpha King. Yet the woman's voice sounded genuine. "You can come in," I said, keeping the poker raised. But slowly. The chair scraped against the floor as someone pushed it from the other side. A moment later, a woman stepped through the shattered doorway. She was older than I expected, perhaps in her 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair. She carried a leather satchel and wore the practical garments of a healer, loose trousers and a tunic with many pockets. Her eyes widened as she took in the destruction. The splintered door, the collapsed desk, the claw marks scoring the wooden floor. "By the moon," she whispered. He said there had been an incident, but her gaze found me, noting the poker in my hand, the wild tangle of my pale hair, the torn hem of my dress. "Are you hurt?" I lowered the poker slightly but didn't set it down. "No, not physically." Relief crossed her features. "That's good. Very good." She set her satchel on the bed and began removing items: jars of salve, rolls of bandages, a small mortar and pestle. "He'll be pleased to hear it." "Why?" I demanded, suddenly angry. Why would he care if his little game left me injured? Isn't that the point? Elise paused, her hands hovering over her supplies. "Game?" She studied my face. "What exactly did he tell you?" "To survive the night," I said bitterly. "That something roamed the palace that might kill me." Then he locked me in, and not an hour later, a wolf the size of a horse tried to tear out my throat. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed swiftly by something that looked remarkably like pity. "Oh, child, that wasn't some random beast." She hesitated, glancing toward the doorway as if worried about being overheard. "That was him," though I had suspected as much after reading the journal. Hearing it confirmed sent a chill through me. "Why? What kind of sick test is this?" Elise sighed, lowering herself to sit on the edge of the bed. "It's not a test, not exactly. She seemed to search for the right words. "The Alpha King has been struggling to maintain control of his wolf form. The shifts come unbidden now, triggered by strong emotion, and when he shifts, he loses himself to the beast," I finished, remembering the journal entries. Surprise flickered across her face. "Yes." "How did you know?" I hesitated before retrieving the journal from my pocket. "I found this in the wreckage of the desk." Elise paled. "You read his private thoughts? Child, if he discovers this—" "He tried to kill me," I interrupted. "I think we're well past worrying about privacy." She shook her head. "He wasn't trying to kill you. If he had been, you wouldn't be standing here having this conversation with me." "Then what was he doing?" Elise was silent for a long moment. "Testing you, perhaps. Or testing himself." She rubbed her temples, suddenly looking very tired. "I've known him since he was a boy. He was different then. Quieter. More thoughtful than his father or brothers. But after what happened to his family—" "What did happen?" I asked, moving closer despite my lingering wariness. "Betrayal," she said simply. "His father, the old Alpha King, was murdered by his own brother, Dorian's uncle. The same night, his mother and younger siblings were slaughtered in their beds." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Dorian was the only survivor, and only because he was away on a hunting expedition. By the time he returned, his uncle had declared himself king." "What did he do?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "What any alpha would do. He challenged his uncle for the throne." Her eyes grew distant. "The battle lasted 3 days. It changed him. The things he had to do, the pain he endured." She shuddered. "He won, but at a terrible cost. His humanity began slipping away that day, and it's been fading ever since." I absorbed this information in silence, trying to reconcile the cold, intimidating figure of the Alpha King with the tortured soul revealed in his journal and now in Elise's account. "Why me?" I finally asked. "Of all the Omegas at the selection, why choose the one no one else wanted?" Elise studied me thoughtfully. "Perhaps because you were different. The others were prepared, groomed to appeal to him. You were just yourself." A small smile touched her lips. "He has a keen nose for deception. Always has." I thought of my grandmother's pendant, still hanging around my neck. Our weakness is our greatest strength. Being overlooked had allowed me to observe without being observed in return. I had learned to see beyond masks and posturing, to recognize truth amid lies. Perhaps the Alpha King possessed a similar skill. "What happens now?" I asked. "Will he return as the wolf? I don't know," Elise admitted. "His shifts are unpredictable these days." She began repacking her satchel. "But dawn is still hours away, and his challenge stands. Survive until sunrise, and he'll spare you." "Spare me from what, exactly?" Elise paused, her expression grave. "From the fate of those who came before you, the ones who couldn't reach whatever remains of his humanity." A chill ran through me. What happened to them? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Instead, she withdrew a small vial from her satchel and pressed it into my palm. Wolfsbane essence, she said quietly. Diluted, but potent enough to momentarily stun a shifted wolf. Use it only if you must. It will buy you seconds, not minutes. I stared at the vial, its contents a deep purple in the firelight. Why are you helping me? Sadness filled her eyes. Because I've watched 6 Omegas die in this room over the past year. Because I've treated his wounds after each one, when he claws at himself in remorse once he regains control. She took a deep breath. And because I heard him speak your name when he sent me to you, the first time he's bothered to learn the name of any Omega brought to this chamber. Hope and dread tangled in my chest, twin serpents coiling around my heart. Thank you, I whispered, tucking the vial into my pocket alongside the journal. Elise moved toward the door, then paused. Remember this, Clara. The wolf may be a beast, but it's still him inside. Speak to the man, not the monster. With that, she slipped out into the corridor, leaving me alone once more with my thoughts. I returned to my vigil by the fire, adding another log to the dying flames. The poker lay across my lap, the vial of wolfsbane within easy reach. I found myself wondering about the Alpha King, Dorian, as Elise had called him. How much of the man remained when the wolf took control? Was he aware of what his beast did? Or did he wake to the aftermath with no memory of the night's events? Time passed in an eerie stillness. The fire crackled, shadows danced, and outside, clouds drifted across the face of the moon. I must have dozed despite my determination to remain alert, for I jerked awake to the sound of claws clicking against stone once more. I was on my feet in an instant, poker in one hand, vial in the other. The chair I'd placed as a barricade still stood in the shattered doorway, but beyond it, amber eyes gleamed in the darkness of the corridor. The wolf had returned. It approached more cautiously this time, head low, ears slightly flattened. Blood matted the fur around its muzzle where I had struck it earlier. It stopped at the threshold, studying me with those intelligent eyes. Dorian, I said, using his name deliberately, watching for a reaction. The wolf's ears pricked forward, a soft whine escaping its throat. Recognition. Confirmation. I know who you are, I continued, my voice steadier than I expected. I know what happened to your family, what you've endured. The wolf paced at the threshold, agitated now, its massive head swinging from side to side. Was it the man or the beast that responded to my words? I couldn't tell. I've read your journal, I admitted, watching carefully for any change in the wolf's demeanor. I know you're losing control, that you fear what you're becoming. I took a step forward, then another, until I stood directly before the barricade. I know you don't want to hurt me. A growl rumbled from the wolf's chest, but it made no move to breach the barrier between us. Its eyes never left mine, intelligent, assessing, conflicted. Elise told me about the others, I said softly, the Omegas who died in this room. She said you regretted each death. I reached for my pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours. I don't think you're a monster, Dorian. Not yet. But you're becoming one with each life you take. The wolf's growl deepened, hackles rising along its spine. I had struck a nerve. You chose me because I was different, I continued, taking another step closer, because I looked at you and saw neither a king nor a beast, but something in between, something still human enough to recognize itself in another outcast. The wolf lunged suddenly, knocking the chair aside with a powerful swipe of its paw. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the vial of wolfsbane. The beast advanced into the room, its massive form seeming to fill the space, blocking the firelight. I raised the poker defensively, but didn't retreat further. I'm not afraid of you, I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I'm not going to die in this room like the others. The wolf circled me slowly, its breath hot against my skin. This close, I could see the individual hairs of its pelt, the powerful muscles that rippled beneath, the intelligence that burned in those amber eyes. It was magnificent and terrifying. A perfect predator. I see you, Dorian, I whispered. I see the man and the wolf, both parts of you. neither one complete without the other. The wolf paused in its circling, head tilting slightly. Something flickered in its gaze. Confusion, perhaps, or surprise. Slowly, I lowered the poker, though I kept the vial of wolfsbane clutched tightly in my other hand. It was a risk, but instinct told me that weapons would only provoke the beast further. If there was any hope of reaching the man within, I needed to speak to him without threat or fear. I understand what it's like to be overlooked. Forgotten, I said. To be seen as less than you are. To have others decide your worth based on what you appear to be rather than who you truly are. The wolf growled softly, but there was less aggression in the sound now. It sat back on its haunches, still watching me intently. You've lost your family, your sense of self, I continued. You're afraid of what you're becoming. I can see it in your eyes, Dorian. The same fear I've carried my entire life. The fear of disappearing completely, of becoming nothing. The wolf whined, a plaintive sound that seemed too vulnerable for such a fearsome creature. Emboldened, I took a step toward it, then another. But you're not nothing, and neither am I. I extended my hand palm up, fingers trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to fight, to use the wolfsbane. Instead, I held my ground, my gaze never leaving those amber eyes. I won't submit to you because I'm afraid, I said, but I will stand with you, if you'll let me. Not as king and subject, not as alpha and omega, but as two souls who recognize the loneliness in each other. The wolf rose, approaching slowly. Its muzzle hovered inches from my outstretched hand, hot breath washing over my skin. One snap of those massive jaws would sever my arm at the wrist. One swipe of those claws would tear open my throat. Instead, the wolf pressed its snout against my palm, a gesture so gentle it brought tears to my eyes. There you are, I whispered. There's the man behind the beast. The wolf's eyes met mine, and for a moment, they seemed to shift from amber to a stormy gray, the color of the Alpha King's human gaze. Then it backed away, moving toward the shattered doorway once more. At the threshold, it turned to look at me one final time before disappearing into the darkness of the corridor, leaving me alone with the wild pounding of my heart and the first faint lightening of the sky outside the windows. Dawn was approaching. I had survived the night, but something told me the true test was only beginning. The first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, painting the destruction around me in shades of gold. I hadn't slept since the wolf's second visit, too wired with adrenaline and confusion to do more than pace the confines of my ruined chamber. The poker had been set aside, the vial of wolfsbane returned to my pocket unused. My fingers kept reaching for my grandmother's pendant, seeking comfort in its familiar contours. I had survived the night, but what came next remained uncertain. Would the Alpha King honor his word? Would he spare me from whatever grim fate had befallen the others? And if he did, what would become of me in this palace of shadows and secrets? A soft knock at the remains of my door pulled me from my thoughts. I tensed, expecting Elise, but the figure that appeared in the doorway was male, tall, lean, with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. The Alpha King requests your presence in his study, he announced, his tone formal but not unkind. I am Theron, his steward. I smoothed my wrinkled dress with trembling hands. Now? Yes. Theron's gaze swept over the destruction of the room, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You may wish to... He gestured vaguely at my appearance. I caught a glimpse of myself in a shard of mirror still hanging on the wall. My pale blonde hair hung in tangled waves around my face, which was smudged with ash from the fire. My dress was torn at the hem and shoulder, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. I looked wild, feral, as though I'd begun to transform into something untamed myself. No, I said, straightening my spine. He can see me exactly as I am after what he put me through. Surprise flickered across Theron's face, quickly masked. As you wish. Follow me, please. I trailed him through corridors of polished stone and gleaming wood, past servants who averted their eyes and guards who watched with thinly veiled curiosity. The palace was different in daylight, less menacing but no less grand. Tapestries depicting the pack's history adorned the walls, interspersed with weapons mounted as displays. Windows overlooking the mountains allowed sunlight to stream across our path, warming the stone beneath my feet. After several minutes of walking in silence, we reached a set of double doors carved with the pack's emblem, a wolf howling beneath a crescent moon. 2 guards stood at attention outside, their expressions impassive. "Wait here," Theron instructed, slipping through the doors and closing them behind him. I stood alone in the corridor, acutely aware of the guards' sideways glances. My hand found my pendant once more, drawing strength from it as I had through the long night. Whatever awaited me beyond those doors, I would face it with the same courage that had kept me alive thus far. The doors swung open, and Theron reappeared. "The Alpha King will see you now," he said, gesturing for me to enter. I stepped into a spacious chamber lined with bookshelves that reached from floor to ceiling. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface scattered with maps and documents. Behind it, standing with his back to me, was the Alpha King. He wore simple clothing, a black tunic and dark trousers tucked into boots, but there was no mistaking the power that radiated from him, even at rest. His dark hair was damp, as if he'd recently bathed, and when he turned to face me, I saw that the scar along his jawline was more prominent in daylight, a pale line against his tanned skin. His eyes, storm gray, just as I remembered, assessed me with the same intensity as the wolf's had. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Leave us," he finally said to Theron, his voice deep and controlled, so different from the growls and snarls of the night before. The steward bowed and retreated, closing the doors behind him with a soft click. We were alone. "You survived," the Alpha King, Dorian stated, his expression unreadable. "I did." I lifted my chin slightly, though not for lack of trying on your part. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "If I had been trying to kill you, Omega, you would not be standing here now." "Clara," I corrected. "My name is Clara, not Omega. And forgive me if I find your distinction about intent rather academic, considering the claw marks on the floor of my chamber." His eyes widened slightly, and I realized I had surprised him with my boldness. Good. Let him see that the night had changed me, that I would not cower before him, king or no. "Clara," he conceded, moving around the desk to stand before me. He was even taller than I remembered, forcing me to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You're the first to survive the night." "So I gathered," I said, thinking of Elise's words, of the 6 Omegas who had died in that room. "Why? What purpose does this ritual serve?" Dorian's gaze shifted away from mine, landing on the window where morning light streamed in. "When I shift, I lose control. The beast takes over, his hands clenched at his sides. I needed to know if anyone could reach me when that happens, could pull me back from the edge of losing myself completely, and the others couldn't, I surmised. So they died. His expression hardened. Yes. The casualness with which he admitted to their death sent a chill through me. "That's monstrous," I whispered. "Yes." He agreed again, surprising me. "It is. I am." He turned back to me, his eyes now cold and distant. "But what choice do I have? The shifts come more frequently now, triggered by anger, by stress, sometimes by nothing at all. If I can't find a way to control the beast..." "You'll become like your uncle," I finished. "A tyrant, a killer." Shock registered on his face. "How do you know about my uncle?" I hesitated, weighing the risk of honesty against the danger of lies. "Elise told me some of your history, and..." I withdrew his journal from my pocket, holding it out to him. "I read this. After your wolf destroyed the desk, I expected rage, perhaps even violence. Instead, he took the journal from my hand with careful movements, as if afraid of touching me accidentally. And yet you still approach the wolf," he said quietly. "Knowing what I've done, what I'm capable of, you offered your hand to the beast." "I spoke to the man," I corrected. "Not the beast." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. He turned away, setting the journal on his desk before facing me once more. "You called me by name," he said. "No one speaks my name to the wolf, they're too afraid." "I'm afraid," I admitted. "I'd be a fool not to be." but fear doesn't have to dictate our choices. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. No, it doesn't. He studied me with renewed interest. What did Elise tell you about me? That you lost your family to betrayal. That you've been losing yourself ever since. I met his gaze steadily. That I'm the first Omega whose name you bothered to learn before locking them in that room. Dorian paced to the window, his movements carrying the same predatory grace as the wolf's. I chose you because you were different, he said after a long silence. The others at the selection, they reeked of ambition, of greed. Some feared me. Others wanted my power, my crown. He turned to look at me over his shoulder. But you smelled of rain and forest earth, of loneliness, of truth. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I remained silent, waiting. You survived the night, he continued. As promised, I'll spare you. He moved back to his desk, his expression shifting to one of cool detachment. You'll be given quarters in the East Wing, away from the main court. You'll be safe there, and free to return to your former life if you wish. That's it? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. A test, a reward, and dismissal? His eyebrow arched slightly. What more did you expect? I don't know, I admitted, but not to be discarded after what happened between us. What happened, he said coldly, is that you survived an encounter with a monster. Nothing more. But there had been more, a connection, a moment of understanding when the wolf had pressed its muzzle against my palm. I had seen recognition in those amber eyes, had felt the man beneath the beast respond to my words, my presence. You're lying, I said softly. To me, and to yourself. Anger flashed across his features, storm clouds gathering in his eyes. Careful, Omega. You survived one night. Don't presume that grants you special privileges or insights. It's Clara. I corrected again, refusing to be cowed by his sudden shift in demeanor. And I'm not presuming anything. I'm observing. I took a step closer to his desk, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. You're afraid. Not of the wolf, but of what the wolf revealed to me. And what was that? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. Your loneliness, I said simply. Your fear of being seen, truly seen by another soul. Something cracked in his expression. A hairline fracture in the mask of the Alpha King. For a heartbeat, I glimpsed the wounded man beneath, the one who had lost everything and feared losing what little remained of himself. Then the mask slammed back into place. You are dismissed, he said, his tone frigid. Theron will show you to your quarters. I should have left then, should have been grateful for my life and the relative freedom he offered. But the memory of the wolf's gentle touch against my palm held me in place. I can help you, I said, the words emerging before I could reconsider them. Dorian froze, his hands splayed across the desk. What? I reached you last night when you were the wolf. I can do it again. I swallowed hard, wondering if I was signing my own death warrant even as I continued. Let me help you find balance, before you lose yourself completely. He stared at me as if I'd suggested setting the palace ablaze. Why would you offer that? After what I put you through, what I've done to others, because I'm tired of being invisible, I said truthfully. Of having no purpose, no place where I truly belong. I touched my pendant, drawing strength from it one more time. My grandmother told me that our weakness is our greatest strength. Maybe being overlooked my whole life has given me the ability to see others clearly, to recognize the truth behind the masks we all wear. Dorian's expression shifted through a series of emotions too rapid to track. Disbelief, suspicion, a flicker of something that might have been hope. It's a convenient offer, he said finally, wariness evident in his tone, one that keeps you close to power, to the throne. I couldn't help it. I laughed, the sound startling in the formal atmosphere of the study. You think I want your crown? Your power? I shook my head. I've spent my life being invisible, Dorian. The last thing I want is to stand in the glaring light of a throne. Then what do you want? He demanded. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I had never been asked before, had never thought my desires mattered enough to consider. Purpose, I said after a moment of reflection. Connection, to be seen for who I am, not what I am. Dorian studied me, his gaze penetrating as if he could see through to my very soul. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy some inner question, for his posture relaxed slightly. "And if I refuse your offer?" he asked. "Then I'll leave," I said with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Return to being the forgotten Omega of the Silver Claw Pack, and you'll continue your search for someone who can reach the man behind the beast." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Outside, clouds passed over the sun, casting the study into momentary shadow before brightness returned. "There will be rules," he said finally, his voice low. "Boundaries that cannot be crossed. The wolf is dangerous, unpredictable. I cannot guarantee your safety." Hope bloomed in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. "I understand." "Do you?" His gaze sharpened. 6 Omegas have died, Clara. 6 souls who thought they could tame the beast. "I don't want to tame you," I countered. "I want to help you find balance. There's a difference." Something shifted in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or the first tentative stirrings of trust. "Very well," he said, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "We will try it your way, but at the first sign of danger, you will remove yourself from my presence. Is that understood?" I nodded, relief and trepidation mingling in my veins. "Understood. Good." He straightened, the mantle of the Alpha King settling over his shoulders once more. "Theron will show you to more suitable quarters. Rest today. We'll begin tonight." As if summoned by his name, Theron appeared at the door. Dorian nodded dismissal, already turning his attention to the papers scattered across his desk. I followed Theron from the study, my mind reeling with the implications of what had just transpired. I had offered myself as a tether to the Alpha King's humanity, a beacon to guide the man back from the beast. It was dangerous, perhaps suicidal, but it was also the first time in my life I had been truly seen, truly needed. As Theron led me through the palace to my new quarters, servants and courtiers whispered behind their hands, their gazes curious and sometimes hostile. News traveled quickly, it seemed. The unremarkable Omega from the selection had survived the night in the Alpha King's chamber and now walked the palace halls with her head held high. I touched my grandmother's pendant, feeling its familiar contours beneath my fingers. "Our weakness is our greatest strength," I whispered to myself, a mantra to carry me forward into the uncertain future that awaited. Behind us, a howl rose from somewhere deep within the palace, mournful, lonely, and filled with a hunger that transcended mere physical need. The sound followed me down the corridor, a reminder of the beast that waited for nightfall, and the man trapped within who had, against all odds, begun to hope. My new chambers were luxurious compared to anything I'd ever known. A spacious bedroom with a canopied bed, a sitting area with plush chairs arranged before a fireplace, and a private bathing chamber with a copper tub large enough for 2. Windows overlooked the forest, offering a view of the mountains beyond, now gilded with afternoon sunlight. After bathing and changing into a simple blue dress provided by a nervous maid, I spent the remainder of the day exploring my new surroundings and preparing myself mentally for the night ahead. No one had told me exactly what to expect, whether Dorian would come to me in human form first, or if I would face the wolf directly once more. As twilight approached, my anxiety grew. I paced the length of my chamber, fingers toying with my grandmother's pendant, rehearsing what I might say to either the man or the beast, when a knock finally came at my door. The sky outside had deepened to indigo, stars beginning to emerge like scattered diamonds. Theron stood in the corridor, his expression grave. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the throne room." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "He's fighting the shift already. Be careful." I nodded, swallowing against the dryness in my throat. "Thank you." The throne room was vast, its ceiling vaulted and supported by columns carved to resemble ancient trees. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the stone floor and the massive throne that dominated the far end of the chamber. The room was empty, save for one figure, Dorian, pacing before the throne like a caged animal, his movements jerky and unnatural. He spun to face me as I entered, his eyes already beginning to change from storm gray to amber. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and the tendons in his neck stood out as if he were physically restraining himself from some violent action. "You shouldn't have come," he growled, his voice deeper than it had been in his study, rough around the edges. I approached slowly, keeping my movements calm and deliberate. "I made a promise." He backed away, putting the throne between us. "It's happening faster tonight. I can't." He broke off with a grimace, his hands curling into claws at his sides. "The wolf wants out. Then let it out," I said, continuing my careful advance. "I'm not afraid. You should be." His body convulsed, a shudder running from his shoulders to his feet. "The wolf remembers you. It wants—" Another convulsion cut off his words. "What does it want?" I asked, now standing directly before the throne, close enough to see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes, the strain of holding back the transformation. "You," he rasped. "It wants you." Before I could respond, he doubled over with a cry that morphed halfway through into a howl. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles rippled beneath his skin, and dark fur erupted along his spine. The transformation was both beautiful and terrible to witness. The man becoming beast before my eyes, caught in the agony of metamorphosis. I stood my ground, though every instinct screamed at me to run. This was why I had stayed, why I had offered my help. If I fled now, any chance of reaching the man within the beast would be lost. When the transformation completed, the massive black wolf stood where Dorian had been, shaking out its pelt as if settling into the new form. Its amber eyes found me immediately, intelligent and hungry. "Hello again," I said softly, fighting to keep my voice steady. The wolf approached slowly, its massive head lowered, hackles slightly raised. There was recognition in its gaze, but also wariness, as if unsure of its welcome. I extended my hand, palm up, as I had done the night before. "I'm here, Dorian. I'm not going anywhere." The wolf circled me, its movements more fluid than they had been during our previous encounters. This time, there was less aggression in its posture. Curiosity had replaced hostility. "You're more in control tonight," I observed, turning to keep my eyes on the wolf. "You remember me, don't you? Remember that I spoke to you, not as a beast, but as a man." The wolf paused in its circling, ears pricked forward at the sound of my voice. It sniffed the air, then approached more directly, its muzzle inches from my outstretched hand. "That's it," I encouraged. "You don't have to fight against the wolf, Dorian. It's part of you. The problem isn't the transformation, it's the separation. The man and the wolf at war with each other, instead of in harmony." The wolf pressed its muzzle against my palm, the touch gentle despite the power evident in every line of its massive form. A tremor ran through its body, and for a moment, I thought it might shift back to human form. Instead, it leaned more heavily against my hand, as if seeking comfort or reassurance. Emboldened, I moved my fingers to scratch behind its ears, the way one might with a large dog. The wolf tensed momentarily, then relaxed into the touch, a rumbling sound emanating from its chest that was closer to a purr than a growl. "There you are," I whispered, a smile tugging at my lips. "Not so fearsome now, are you?" The wolf huffed, as if offended by the suggestion, but made no move to pull away from my touch. Instead, it circled around me and settled on the stone floor, looking up with an expectant expression. Understanding what it wanted, I sat beside the wolf, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from its massive body. For a time, we simply existed in each other's presence, the silence of the throne room broken only by the wolf's steady breathing and the occasional distant sound from elsewhere in the palace. "My grandmother used to tell me stories," I said eventually, my voice soft in the stillness. "Tales of the first werewolves who found balance not by fighting their dual nature, but by embracing it. The wolf and the human," she said, "are not enemies. They're two halves of the same soul." The wolf's ears twitched, its amber eyes fixed on my face as if drinking in every word. She told me that the strongest alphas were those who could speak with their wolves, not just command them. I hesitated, then added, I think she would have liked you, Dorian, both sides of you. The wolf made a soft whining sound, resting its massive head on its paws. I know you're afraid, I continued, reaching out to stroke its fur, afraid of losing control, of becoming like your uncle. But fighting against your nature only makes the divide deeper. I thought of the journal entries, the growing frequency of uncontrolled shifts. You need to find harmony, not dominance. As the night deepened around us, I continued to talk, sharing stories of my childhood, of my grandmother's wisdom, of my life as the overlooked Omega. The wolf listened with surprising attentiveness, its body gradually relaxing until it was pressed against my side, a living furnace in the cool air of the throne room. Hours passed this way, until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The wolf stirred, lifting its head to look toward the windows. It's almost morning, I said, following its gaze. Will you shift back now? The wolf rose to its feet, stretching in a motion that reminded me of a cat. It padded a short distance away, then turned to look at me over its shoulder. The message was clear. Stay where you are. I remained seated as the transformation began in reverse, fur receding, limbs lengthening, the wolf's form twisting and reshaping into that of a man. Unlike the shift from human to wolf, this transformation seemed less painful, more fluid, as if the return to human form came more naturally. When it was complete, Dorian knelt on the stone floor, his back to me, breathing heavily. He was unclothed, his bare shoulders rising and falling with each breath, the muscles of his back defined in the early morning light. There's a robe behind the throne, he said after a moment, his voice hoarse but steady. I retrieved the garment and brought it to him, keeping my eyes averted as he stood and wrapped it around himself. When I dared to look at his face, I was struck by the clarity in his eyes, the storm-gray irises free of the haunted shadows I had seen the day before. You stayed, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. All night. I told you I would. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. So you did. He studied me, his head tilting slightly. You spoke to the wolf, about balance, about harmony. You remember? Everything, he confirmed. For the first time I was present, aware. The wolf and I, we were... He seemed to struggle for the right words. In sync, I supplied, not fighting for control. Yes. His expression grew thoughtful. Your grandmother's stories about werewolves finding balance. I've never heard those tales before. I smiled. She had unusual ideas about many things. The elders of our pack considered her eccentric at best, dangerous at worst. Yet she seems to have understood something that has eluded our scholars for generations. He gestured toward a bench along the wall, and we moved to sit, a comfortable distance between us. Tell me more about her. As the sun rose fully, painting the throne room in shades of gold and amber, we talked, truly talked, as equals rather than king and subject. I shared more of my grandmother's wisdom, her unconventional beliefs about werewolf nature, her insistence that true strength came from harmony rather than dominance. In return, Dorian spoke of his childhood, of the weight of expectations placed upon him as the eldest son, of his struggle to reconcile the man his father wanted him to be with the man he believed himself to be. After my family was killed, he said, his voice low, the wolf took over during the battle with my uncle. For 3 days, I was lost to the rage, the grief. When I finally shifted back, the throne was mine, but something inside me had broken. The balance, the harmony, it was gone. And you've been trying to regain control ever since, I said, understanding dawning. But control isn't what you need. It's acceptance. He looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You understand, don't you? What it's like to be at war with yourself. In a different way, perhaps, I admitted. As an Omega in a world that values only strength and dominance, I've spent my life believing I was less than I am. Invisible. Forgettable. I see you, Clara, he said softly. I've seen you from the moment you stood in that clearing, refusing to play the game the others played. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words, a sensation so foreign it took me a moment to recognize it as belonging. "What happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that hung between us. Dorian was silent for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. "More nights like this one, I hope. The wolf is calmer when you're near, more manageable." He hesitated, then added, "If you're willing." "I am," I said, perhaps too quickly. But it was true. For the first time in my life, I had found purpose, connection, a place where my supposed weakness had become strength. On one condition. His eyebrow arched slightly. "Which is?" "No more tests," I said firmly. "No more locked rooms or trials by survival. We work together, as equals." Surprise flickered across his features, followed by something that might have been respect. "Agreed." Outside, the palace was awakening. Servants moving through distant corridors, guards changing shifts at the gates. Soon, the throne room would no longer be our private sanctuary. "The council will have questions," Dorian said, rising to his feet. "About you, about your presence here. Let them question," I replied, standing as well. "I'm not afraid of their judgment." The ghost of a smile returned to his lips. "No, I don't suppose you are." He extended his hand to me, not as the Alpha King to a lowly Omega, but as one person to another. "Until tonight, Clara." I placed my hand in his, feeling the strength in his grip, the warmth of his skin against mine. "Until tonight, Dorian." As we parted at the throne room doors, the morning sun streaming through the windows behind us, I touched my grandmother's pendant one final time. Our weakness is our greatest strength. In being overlooked, I had learned to truly see. In being forgotten, I had become unforgettable to the one person who mattered. The Alpha King had challenged me to survive the night. Instead, I had shown him how to truly live.